So, welcome everybody to the next in our series of the PERG EWI coffee breaks. I am Allison Couples, the PERG EWI coordinator. So, thank you for joining us. I have to stop here and just thank our 2024 annual sponsors. None of this would be possible without them. So, thank you to them for giving us the opportunity to bring all of these fantastic webinars your way. Next, I would like to introduce our speaker. We'll hear from Matthew Duclos, our master lens technician and engineer at Duclos Lenses. He's going to talk about the role of the cinema lens technician. Let us know all about that. So without further ado, Matt, please take it away.
Thank you, Allison. Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Duclos. Thank you guys for being here today. Thank you to PERG for having me. I'm excited to dive into the world of cinema lens technicians and give you guys an idea of what the job is all about. So I'll give you a bit of my background as a lens technician and engineer, but keep in mind that my path isn't necessarily typical. It's a little unusual. So I began learning from my father, who's also a lens technician. He got his start at Ingenue back in the 70s, and worked his way up there. Ended up going to a prominent rental house here in Los Angeles, and then on to some more specialized development companies where he did a lot of cool things, won an Academy Award for some of his work. And then in 2002, he and I started Duclos Lenses. So the bulk of my education came from working with my father during summer breaks, weekends, that sort of thing. So then I went on to work at a rental house myself, one of the bigger ones here in LA. And when things really started picking up around the time digital cinematography sort of burst onto the scene, things really started picking up at Duclos Lenses, and I rejoined my father full time, and it's just been nonstop since then. So what does a cinema lens technician do? In simple terms, we make sure that the lenses are used in a way that benefits the filmmaking process. We want to make sure that the cinematographer has the tool that they need to achieve their vision. If you had asked me 20 years ago, I'd say we make lenses perfect. But these days, that's not always the case. Sometimes perfect isn't the goal. So that's why I say our goal is to give the cinematographer the tool that they need to achieve their artistic vision. I'm sort of hitting my bullet points here, so I'm gonna go in order, really talking about the role of the lens technician. So the appeal of the profession to me is that it's a really ideal blend of art and science, creative and technical. You're not just sitting in a back room somewhere, you're part of the process of making films look amazing. And getting to work with cinematographers and filmmakers is always fun. They kind of keep you on your toes. You think you know what they want, and they throw a curveball, and it gets really interesting. And it's been extremely eye-opening. It's definitely not a job that you would do for recognition. In 24 years of working here, I think Duclos Lenses has been mentioned in the credits once, maybe twice, of a film. So it's not the kind of profession you would get into if you're looking for that sort of accolade. So the pathway, sort of the required skills, the formal education part of it, there really isn't any. I get often asked, how do I become a lens technician? And there's not really any one way to do it. You're not going to find anyone with a college degree that says cinema lens technician, but it doesn't mean that education isn't still important. Vocational and technical courses are a great way to get started, especially courses focused on mechanics and optics. That's really sort of the foundation of everything that we're doing. And having a good foundation in physics, engineering, that's a huge benefit. Understanding optics and electromagnetic waves that really helps you once you get to the more advanced challenges of cinema lens servicing. Yeah, thank you, Harry. Just reminder to people, if you have questions, throw them in there. I don't think many of this audience will have questions, but the people afterwards might, so I'll keep an eye on comments after the fact as well. So the technical skills, there's sort of the essential technical skills that I think everybody needs to do this job. Obviously precision mechanics, getting comfortable with fine motor skills is absolutely key. Cinema lenses are delicate. They're more robust than a photo lens, but there's still very delicate parts inside the lens. So you have to understand optics and electronics, even basic circuitry. A lot of modern lenses have motors and encoders and a lot of electronics, so that's still becoming more and more relevant. And specifically understanding how all of these components work together, mechanically, optically. That's why we frequently use the term optomechanic. It's crucial day to day. You have to know, there's so many people that understand one or the other, but having both of those combined really is kind of the key to a good lens technician. And obviously being technically inclined. If you're just book smart and you know everything about physics, it's not really going to help you further the craft of lens technician. So continuous learning is a big topic for me. I think there's really no reason not to continue learning. There's a lot of what we consider the old technicians, the old guard, the master technicians. And I think there's one thing that they all have in common is that they continue to learn. They never stop learning, especially in modern cinema lenses. They're kind of going through an evolution right now. And there's no reason not to continue learning always. There's industry workshops, there's online courses, there's certifications that can help with that. Some manufacturers offer training. Sometimes Duclos Lenses offers training with PERG. Thank you, PERG. And that's a really good way to make sure that you're staying up to date and current on lens technology. Moving on to practical experience. This is what I consider one of the most important aspects of a lens technician. It's very frequently we find people that want to get into this role and want to just blast ahead, and you really can't do that. You have to get that practical experience, and that just takes time. Nothing beats real world hands-on experience. Internships and apprenticeships are the key, in my opinion, to getting your foot in the door. But the most common way is looking for opportunities at rental houses with lens manufacturers, service centers. The role of prep tech is kind of the natural progression for most lens technicians. So getting that practical experience handling lenses day in and day out, whether coming to and from rentals and passing them to another department, just having your hands on the lenses goes a long way. And if you're lucky, that'll usually get you an opportunity to shadow or learn from an experienced technician. And that's the absolute best way to sort of get your foot into this role. Just sort of doing it on your own usually isn't the best approach. So starting at a rental house where there is a technician that knows or has a good amount of experience is absolutely the best path. Having a senior or master lens technician to sort of fast track your experience is a huge benefit. They're not just going to teach you technical skills, they're going to help you build connections in the industry. They're going to help you, they're going to share the mistakes they've already made with you so that you don't make them as well. It's an invaluable, it's in my opinion, the best path into this profession. All right. Tools and equipment is my next topic. There's a handful of tools that every technician should have. And when I say tools, I don't necessarily mean hand tools. Obviously, you need hand tools, but test equipment I consider tools as well. So the test projector, I think everybody that's even considering getting into this role knows that a test projector is sort of the bread and butter of any lens technician. It's it's what we do 90% of our work with, and it allows us to see exactly what a lens is doing. It's sort of the equivalent to a doctor's stethoscope. It's the first tool that we use to evaluate a lens, aside from our hands and our eyes, but that seems kind of obvious. It's the first tool we use in any diagnosis procedure, so it's an absolute must. The autocollimator may be slightly less common, but still just as, if not more important. The autocollimator allows us to simulate infinity focus so that we're not, you know, we don't need hundreds or thousands of feet to test a lens. We can put a lens on an autocollimator that simulates infinity focus, and we can check the performance at those longer distances. Focus charts, pretty straightforward. Every rental house has a focus chart. That's probably the most common test tool that you'll see, and it's a great way to get a practical reading of the lens rather than just specialized test equipment. So using a focus chart lets you look at the lens and the camera combined, which sometimes is a big benefit, rather than just the lens on an isolated piece of test equipment. And then all the general tools, general and specialized. General meaning screwdrivers, spanners, everything that a lens technician uses day to day, the actual hand tools. And then specialized, I mean, some lenses require a very unique tool that either the manufacturer provides or that over time we've kind of learned, okay, this particular procedure really benefits from this strange thing that we've made. And those are just the things you learn over time. Any questions so far? Come on, we have to have one question through this whole thing. You guys think about it. So the workshop, the actual space that a technician works in, I've seen the entire gamut from the afterthought backroom closet that they give a technician to maintain lenses up to the lab setting, like what we use here. We have a dedicated space for all of our technicians that's very clean. It's very controlled as far as temperature and humidity, and that is very, very important. It really reflects the care that you're going to be putting into the lenses. Sometimes that's not really your choice. Sometimes you just work with what you have. When we first started Duclos Lenses, we had a basically extra space from another company that they leased to us, and it was not ideal, but it's what we had. So you need an environment that encourages precision work, and that's everything in this field is precision. So you have to make sure that your tools are calibrated, everything's clean and in good condition. I think the biggest takeaway for the tools is that your work can only be as accurate as your tools. You could be the most talented technician out there, but if you don't have clean, well-calibrated tools, it's not going to work. Jack, hey Jack, how are you? Asked a question. I will answer that after. I'll answer that during the Q&A portion. Thank you, Jack. Okay, so career development and general versus specialized. So when I say specialized, I mean there's really different paths a cinema lens technician can take. General meaning you're servicing and repairing lenses day to day. It's the routine. Specialized meaning there's sort of a subset within that field that you're specializing in. So generally, once you have some experience in your belt, you can start thinking about a specialization. Some technicians focus on lens modifications or anamorphic conversions or rehousing. Those are what I consider sort of the specialized branches of lens technician. Especially with all the vintage lenses out there, that's become a whole subset of the role of lens technician. As far as developing your career, it really kind of depends on, are you at a rental house? Are you independent? There's a lot of variables there, but either way, reputation is everything. You have to build a reputation. You have to rely on that reputation. The quality of your workmanship, the attention to detail, your trustworthiness. It's the backbone of your career development, and over time that portfolio that you build will speak for itself. There's no amount of marketing or outreach can substitute a reputation, a solid reputation. And like I said before, the difference between working at a company, a larger company, or sort of being independent, I get that question a lot from a lot of different people, especially at events where there's service training. Maybe there's a lot of technicians in one place, and a lot of people ask, should I go out on my own? Should I do my own thing? And that's always been a tricky question. I'd say it's way more tricky now than it has ever been because of the state of the industry. And yeah, being independent offers some flexibility. It offers a little bit more creativity, potentially. But I don't know that I would recommend that currently, since we're in the middle of a bit of a lull in the industry. My next, I think I skipped one. That's okay, I'll go back to it in a minute. So networking with cinematographers and filmmakers, that's another key to developing your career as a lens technician. Building those connections with cinematographers and filmmakers really opens up doors. It's necessary because you can't do this in a vacuum. You have to know what your customers want. You have to know what they're asking for. And being collaborative with them is the best way to do that. I think the most common way to do that is just industry events. All the events that PERG puts on are amazing for that type of interaction. Talking with rental house owners, that's your bridge to that conversation. If you don't necessarily have the opportunity to talk with cinematographers and directors and ACs directly, talking with rental house owners and rental house managers is the next best thing, because they are hearing that feedback every day, and that gives you an idea of what people are looking for. That's your bridge to those connections. And then obviously collaborating with manufacturers. There's so many manufacturers now. From time to time, they'll do special one-off jobs and customizations, things like that. And that's a really good chance to sort of interact with the other side of that equation, the companies that are making the tools that the cinematographers are looking for. So in summary, that's my take on becoming a lens technician. It's an amazing path. It's very fulfilling. Everything from the very beginning, learning the technical basics and getting hands-on experience, to putting in that time and passion and seeing those results make films can be extremely rewarding. Being able to see the talent of a cinematographer and them achieving a vision that you helped make in some way, maybe it's a little tiny way, is extremely rewarding. I'm going to jump to some of the questions. So Jack had asked about lens mounts in the market. He said, how are all the new lens mounts in the cine market affecting projector tech models logistics? So I think what he's asking basically is all the different standards that we see coming onto the scene, how is that affecting our ability to keep up and test them properly on our test equipment? Because you have to have the corresponding mount on the projector to test a specific lens. And that is a challenge. It's absolutely a challenge. It goes back to what I was saying before about staying current. You have to stay up to date. You have to know the latest tools, the latest trends, and mirrorless cinema cameras are by far the most rapidly changing standard. You know, for decades it was you had to have maybe Area Standard and Area B mount and PL mount, and maybe if you were really broad, you would include a Panavision mount from time to time. You get some obscure project, and that's all you needed. Now you need, because of the crossover between stills and cine, you need PL and LPL. You need RF, EF, Z, Micro Four Thirds, L mount, Z mount. I mean, you name it, all sorts of mounts. And it's absolutely challenging. Some of that challenge we take on ourselves. We design and manufacture mounts so that we can test lenses like that. And the other half of it, we rely on the manufacturer of the test projector. So for example, we really like the Corzeal TP7. We rely on their the mounts that they make available, which is not all of them. So whatever we don't have access to through Corzeal, generally speaking, we manufacture ourselves so that we can stay current. And then for the vintage, sort of the legacy mounts, we still keep a Century projector as well that we have dozens of mounts for. There's really almost no lens that we can't project and get a good reading on the image. I hope that answers your question, Jack. But also on that note, I'll dive in a little deeper. We're also sort of backing ourselves into a corner, and I can't say there's no way to stop it. The lens and camera manufacturers want you to buy new lenses. So when they release a new mount standard and you have to go buy all new lenses, that's great business for them, but the mounts, the flanges keep getting shorter and shorter. And eventually we'll back ourselves into a corner where we can't use adapters, we can't use, like the click-on style adapters. Everything will be such a short flange distance, you'll have to physically change out components, which will be a challenge for sure. Let's see, Sally. Hey, Sally, how are you? Sally asked about the most difficult lens to service. I don't know that I want to throw anyone under the bus during a recorded session, as far as manufacturers go. I would say it's not necessarily a brand or a model, but rather the condition in which they come in. So we see everything from tiny little back focus adjustment, routine maintenance, very basic stuff, all the way to lenses that were completely submerged in salt water or dropped off the back of a car rig. I think those are the real challenges. The stuff that, yeah, sure, maybe there's some lenses that are challenging to service and they require specialty tools and they take more time. That's all fine. But when the real challenge comes in is when you have to find a solution to something that there isn't a manual, there isn't a procedure to address that problem. So things like saltwater contamination, maybe fungus. Um, Jack said elites. Yeah, most Russian lenses are a major challenge just because they weren't designed or manufactured well. So we can overhaul I'll use an elite for example. We can overhaul an elite and then 6 months another issue pops up because it's just not designed to hold up well. So I don't mind throwing that under the bus. They're not around anymore, so that's fine. Harry asked about the levels of professional lens technicians. It's not firmly defined. We actually have it's sitting right here next to me. I'm looking at it. We had started working on a list, basically a roles diagram or a breakdown of roles for lens technicians, mostly internally because we need to understand our structure because we have so many technicians. I think I haven't researched this, but I want to say that Duclos Lenses has the most lens technicians under one roof for an independent service company. So we needed to define those roles and those levels. And in doing that, we came up with a handful. Actually, I don't know if I can. It has a giant draft warning on it, so don't hold me to this. But the levels were apprentice lens tech. Your starting point, entry level, 1 to 2 years experience. They're still learning the craft. Your junior lens tech, where they kind of know the foundation, they know what to do, they can do basic tasks. And then lens technician, which is the most common role. That's sort of your day to day, working on lenses day in, day out. Then senior lens technician, implying you've got a lot more experience and you're helping the lower technicians learn more. And then master technician, meaning you've been doing it your entire career. There's almost no challenge you can't tackle. And I spelled these all out very, very clearly with the years of experience and the qualifications, basically. So maybe we'll publish this someday. I was kind of passing it around. Some of you on this call will know I've passed it around privately, but maybe someday we'll publish that and people will actually use it. So thank you for asking that, Harry. Do you have any suggestions for courses or resources for education? Well, so that's kind of what I was saying earlier. There isn't really one specific educational path. And it really depends on what specifically you're doing. There is no course for a lens technician.
This is probably what
Some manufacturers will offer.
connects to Wi-Fi and has 2K resolution, full color night vision.
Can we mute Mr. Jawanda? There you go. Thank you. So some manufacturers will offer training for a specific lens, like a specific model, and that's very, very useful. But I often say those trainings, you almost learn as much from the other technicians that you're training with as you do from the manufacturer. When you're learning on a specific lens, it's extremely helpful, like I said, but getting that interaction with other technicians and having oh, that's how you've done that? Oh, I try this, and oh, you should try that. And it's amazing interactions. So keep an eye out on lens manufacturers that offer training. I know Cook used to, Angenu used to as well. Lights does sometimes. Zeiss is actually really good about training. They have specific people that will come to rental houses and train. And we do one-on-one training from time to time. So for a technician that wants to learn more about a specific lens, we'll do that with them and kind of give them a hand on that lens. And we have done our lens technician training with PERG in the past. I'm not sure if that's going to happen again. We'll see. So keep an eye on those. And then courses, like specific courses, you're not going to find a school or a institute or anything that's going to offer formal training. But education in general, sort of like I said before, the concepts that are applied to cinema lens technician. So engineering, electromagnetic waves, physics, that's all extremely helpful, and there's tons of books. In fact, if you go to let me see if this works. Yeah, you go to books.ducloslenses.com, and there's a whole bunch of books that are amazing. I think the Cine Lens Manual from Jay Holman is an absolute must. Anybody that's even thinking about getting into lenses deeper has to read the Cine Lens Manual. And there's a handful of others. The Introduction to Modern Optics is very, very simplified, but broadly applicable to the role of cinema lens technician. James asked, are there any particular tasks or maintenance duties that would be best suited for beginning techs, intermediate tasks? Okay, so that's really the junior tech and the apprentice role. So I can really only speak for our company specifically, but our junior technician role would generally be doing sort of the less complex tasks. And it sounds very obvious, but it would be basic disassembly, collimation, cleaning parts, just so they're getting more familiar with the tools, the hardware, the process of disassembly, but they're really being they're being overseen by a higher technician that can teach them everything that they need to know for those basic skills. So as far as maintenance duties, yeah, collimation is probably the easiest starting point for a junior technician, which means removing the mount, or you're taking a measurement on the collimator, removing the mount, adjusting the shims, putting the mount back on, checking on the collimator, going back and forth. The really basic tasks like that are really well suited for a junior technician. Below that, again, goes back to what I was saying before about getting your foot in the door. Scrubbing cases is usually where most of the junior techs start. You start as a prep tech, and that's it sounds terrible, but I know so many good technicians that started out scrubbing cases at a rental house, and then you go on to pulling gear for the AC or the DP, then you go on to shadowing the lens technician that is on staff there. It's a really natural progression. My favorite / weirdest DIY tool / jig you've made. Ooh. I didn't make it myself. My father made it, but I think my favorite one is a chassis puller for Zeiss Super Speeds. So if a Zeiss Super Speed is heavily impacted, we made a tool, a jig that holds the front and the rear, and you just tighten the bolts one at a time, and it perfectly straightens the entire chassis of a Super Speed. And it just looks cool. It's such a simple tool. It's a simple concept. It's like frame pulling on a car. And it's just a fun tool. That's probably my favorite. Oh, here's a long one from Stosh. What are the best ways for a young, emerging, technically predisposed individual to build some core skills? Large rental houses, boutique rental houses. Are there volunteer opportunities for learning? Are there opportunities outside of California? I don't know that. See, I'm giving this presentation at a rather challenging time in our industry. So I don't, as far as opportunities go, there's probably more opportunities outside California than there are right now.
Não, tranquilo, tranquilo. Nem tô ao vivo, não. Só tô escutando.
Yep, I agree. I don't know what he said. For people that are predisposed technically, maybe they're inclined, they have some natural skills. Obviously, any rental house is a good starting point, whether it's a giant rental house or a boutique, doesn't matter. Generally speaking, you'll have higher level technicians to learn from at a larger rental house. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have the structure or the opportunity to provide that to a junior technician. Anytime that we have had someone in an intern role, we have always defined that as the role of an intern must be a burden to the technician or the company that is providing the internship. If it's not, then we're not doing that intern a good, we're not servicing them well. At that point, they're just helping us, which is not the point of an internship. So some companies, some technicians are not going to be helpful. They don't want an apprentice. They don't want a junior technician under them. So it's not necessarily about the rental house, whether it's a big one or a boutique. You could find that role at either. It really depends more on the person that is there. Working with manufacturers, I don't know. That's a trickier one because you really have to be local, and there's not a whole lot of opportunity for lens manufacturing in the US anymore. But there's a ton of opportunity at adjacent companies. So we all of us here think of optics, we think of lenses, we think of photographic lenses. There's so many other fields or other industries that optics apply to. So having a role in an adjacent company could be really, really beneficial, especially aerospace. That's a huge field for optics, medical, automotive. There's no downside to a company like that, and getting a foundation of optics can only help. So there might be more opportunities outside of the film industry, outside of the photographic field, that could also be helpful. And that might also prove to be a better platform to sort of flex any natural technical aptitude that you have, and could actually be more well-rounding as well. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Stosh. Any other questions? Okay, I kind of sped through that super fast. Is lens evaluation a junior tech job? Yes and no. That's a good question, Harry. Thank you. In terms of, I guess it depends on what your goal for the evaluation is. For us, as a service provider, it's definitely not a solitary role for a junior technician. If we had junior technicians performing our evaluations and then feeding that data to our service manager that's creating the estimates, tons of stuff would be missed. So as far as evaluations go, for the purpose of giving a customer a baseline of what the lens is doing and what needs to be done to improve it, no, it's not a good role. It's a good role for a junior lens technician to shadow a senior technician performing lens evaluations, because they're the ones that know, the senior technician is the one that knows what they're looking for, what to look for in a lens. What could be wrong, what could be causing that thing that is wrong. So in that regard, yes, it's a great role for a junior technician to shadow a senior technician performing evaluations. And that's, I have to again say with a small caveat that that's specific to our business. At a rental house, it's probably more acceptable for a junior tech to perform evaluations. And by that, I mean lenses coming back from a rental, and the rental house just needs to know the bare basics, the bare minimum. Does the focus and zoom and iris ring move without getting hung up? Does it focus on the projector? The basics, yes. In that case, a junior tech is probably okay doing that. That I should make that distinction very clear. Because here at Duclos Lenses, we're not seeing lenses that are probably fine. We when we get a lens here, it's because something is not working. Something got dropped, something internal has gone out of whack and needs to be corrected. So the lenses that are coming to a service facility, they're going there because they're broken. And the person evaluating it needs to know what they're looking for. At a rental house where they're just checking it and making sure it's still working the way it was when it went out, that's probably fine for a junior technician. It really depends on how cautious that rental house wants to be. It depends on their availability of their senior technicians. If the rental house is super active and the senior tech is performing more in-depth maintenance and more in-depth repairs, then yes, that would naturally fall to the junior tech to perform the sort of more basic routine stuff like checking lenses. Can you talk a little more about the rental lens tech role with camera assistant? Yes. I'm not sure if I understand your question correctly. If you're talking about the role within, okay, during check, yeah. So I have a pretty good amount of experience with that. I was the head of the lens department at a larger rental house here in LA for a while, and that was absolutely a day-to-day task. Interfacing with the clients. I'm kind of aging myself now. So this was before all of the tuning and detuning and all that stuff. So generally speaking, back when I was doing that day to day, it was more, hey, this lens isn't quite coming up on the mark, or hey, this lens has a little too much distortion. What else do you have that can help me? And it was a little bit more simplified. Nowadays, it's, hey, this custom tuned lens has a little bit more aberration than I want. Can we dial it back? And I don't envy rental house technicians these days because everybody wants something unique. Everybody wants something different, and that's extremely challenging. So back when the role was a little more simple, it was extremely important for me to be interfacing with the customers checking out the gear, whether it was the DP or the AC, whoever is setting up the prep. And being available to them, to go through the lenses with them, to show them that they've been maintained, show them comparisons. Maybe they feel that the focus on one lens is a little heavy, and you could say, well, no, that's just how this lens is. Here's 3 others. They all feel the same. It's part of that lens, that sort of thing. But that's a very important role. Having somebody, the lens technician being the technical person that can speak to those customers confidently and accurately is extremely important, in my opinion. I'm biased because that was my role. But it's better to have that technical person than just, a rental manager or some marketing person that goes to the prep floor and says whatever the customer wants to hear. So there's a whole presentation that I give to film students that is basically a very kind way of saying, don't be that guy going to a rental house saying, hey, I want to check, here's my prep package. Oh, by the way, I also want to use your projector and check all my lenses myself. That was always a challenge. And when we would do it for good customers, we would say, sure, come on in. But I remind all the film students, because they're the ones that we're all going to be servicing someday, by doing that, you're going to derail that technician's routine, their maintenance routine. If you're an active rental house and you have 20 lenses on your cart that need to be prepped for a camera package that day, and that one DP or that one AC comes in and wants to check everything on the projector before they even put it on their camera, that's going to tie up your projector for an hour, and it's going to derail everything. So it's a very important role. It's a very delicate role. because you can't say no to the customer. You still have to help them. That's your job. But it has to be managed very carefully. So it is very important. Any other questions? I see a lot of people. Bianca, you must have a question. Come on. Who else can I call out here?
No, I don't have a question. Just talk. Not talking too much. And no, when you were saying I can say about like the rental houses, much like of the, the work you get to do when you work at a boutique rental house. And I think you're right. Like smaller houses might have a bit less experienced people, but when you're starting, I feel like you get to do more things, right? At a smaller house. So I think that's the advantage of
Yeah,
working at a smaller house would be that you get your hands dirty quicker.
that's actually very true. I don't have any firsthand experience with that. I got thrown straight into one of the biggest rental houses in LA, but I was always envious of colleagues that worked at the smaller rental houses that they just seem to have more opportunity as a technician to tinker and learn and get feedback from clients. Whereas at a bigger rental house, a bigger company, it was all business. It was all go, 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 very structured, very rigid.
Mhm.
So Bianca's absolutely right. The smaller boutique, mid-size rental houses, there's still a ton of opportunity there. Potentially even more. Like I said, the bigger rental houses may not may not have the capacity, or in some cases even the policy, to allow for more hands-on training. They may see a junior lens tech or an apprentice and say, no, 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 you don't touch anything. You just follow that senior tech. Whereas a smaller boutique house is going to be a little more accommodating.
Mhm. Yeah. No, and I think as a lens tech, just always go with caution, right? I was my own lens tech for like 3 months when we didn't have anyone. And because I knew how to like take out the front element, and then I thought I could clean the rear element, and then I removed it and I cleaned it. And then I told Michael Nadas from Cook, I'm like, Mike, yeah, I did it on my own. My son's like, oh, no, no, no. Shouldn't have done that. Because there are some things that you might think is, right? Like once you're in it, I think it's just important just to say that there's a lot that can happen once you open a lens, right? So I'm like, oh, I just removed this clean and put it back. But no, it affected so many other things that I wasn't aware right then.
Yep. Yeah, that's
So,
getting a little more technical. That's more or less a company policy that we have. If you even take the mount off, even if you take the mount off and put it right back on the lens, you immediately assume that it has been thrown out of spec just by default.
mm-hmm,
So you take a front element, you put it right back after you clean it. You just assume, okay, I've disrupted the spec, the specifications. It has to be checked and recalibrated. It's just a firm policy that we have here, to avoid any assumptions, like you said. So that, let's see, front element, that would have been junior lens tech. So Bianca, you're officially a junior lens tech.
woohoo. Yeah, I convert the 12 times a few times. Although our screws got a bit not that great. I wonder if it was when I was doing our own lenses. I think with time, right? That happens to everybody.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
that's definitely a developed skill. Learning, again, we're gonna kind of diving more technically here, but learning how to feel. It sounds really silly, but learning how to feel a screw. Any of the other technicians on this call will know what I mean. You can feel when a screw is about to strip. You can feel when it's about to break free. You can feel
Mhm.
it. You just you feel it. It sounds silly. It sounds cliche, but you become one with your screwdriver through the lens, or through the one with the lens through the screwdriver. And every junior technician is going to spend many hours, days, stripping screws, over tightening screws, under tightening screws. It's just part of the learning process that you develop that feeling as a technician. Carrie says yes. Carrie would absolutely know what I'm talking about. Feeling the lens and feeling the screw is a big deal. And that only comes with experience. There's no way to teach that. There's no way to describe it. Yeah, exactly. Carrie would absolutely know what I'm talking about. Carrie would understand because she's done it many times, just like every technician. If you ask any lens technician and they say, no, I've never stripped a screw, they're absolutely lying. Same thing with dropping a lens. You ask a technician, have you ever dropped a lens? They say, no, never. They're either lying or they haven't been doing it long enough, because at some point everyone drops something. It's just inevitable. A couple people here maybe know my big mistake. You do it once and you learn forever. I was very young. I don't know if who was on here, that a couple people might have heard this. It was a 25 to 250 HR big zoom lens. The focus group is 3 separate groups that all stack on top of each other, and this was probably 20 years ago, at least, if not more. And I didn't put a lock ring in, and I went to turn the lens over to set it on my desk, and the whole group fell out because I was young, I was careless. But that's how you learn. You have to make those mistakes to learn. That's one of my key takeaways, or one of my key learning. It just comes down to experience. You have to have that experience to learn what not to do. And I can proudly say that I never made that mistake again. I have never dropped a lens since then. But you have to make the mistake to learn to learn from it.
You should never waste a good mistake.
Exactly. Yep. And I will never forget that. My father will never forget it either, because that was a very expensive mistake. Any more questions?
It looks like we're closing in on our hour here too, so I think we can,
Good time.
yeah, begin to wrap it up. Matt, can you say one more time, you talked about 2 books. I think you said the CineLens Manual and the Introduction to Modern Optics were the 2. Who are their authors again?
CineLens Manual will be Jay Holben. So just go to books. Actually, let me make sure it works again. I don't know if it was books or book. Yeah, books.ducloslenses.com. So the CineLens Manual is Jay Holben. And then Introduction to Modern Optics is Grant Fowles. So both of those are on our website. You could buy them there. I think they're both in stock. Yeah, they're both in stock. And there's a handful of other ones that are cinematography related. There's a couple other more technical ones, like Introduction to Lens Design. But that Intro to Modern Optics, I think most technicians have that book. Oh, Allison posted. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. Yep.
Oh, and definitely, Harry, the coffee cup. Get all your Lens Geek swag on our website. I don't want to make it too much of a commercial, but yeah, all that stuff is great.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We really truly appreciate it, and it's really valuable information for those coming up in our rental houses. Definitely.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I obviously have to mention that we still have grants open for the EWI program, and we are still accepting grant applications. So please, if you are if you're currently hiring, give those entry-level employees a really broad industry perspective with kind of additional training opportunities through EWI. I put the application link in the chat, so you can find it there. And I hope everyone will join us for our next upcoming coffee breaks. We have another one coming up the end of this month, and looking forward into October and November. So I'm excited to bring more of these to everyone, and we will close it up there. Thank you everyone so much for coming.